Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share cryptids encounter stories. First story: the truth about skinwalkers. A few years ago, I dated this Native American girl from the Southern Ute Indian Reservation in Ignacio, Colorado. Me at the time being a black 20-year-old from the hood of Baltimore, Maryland, knew almost nothing about Native American culture, legends, or any of that stuff. So when she first told me about skinwalkers and that they're real, I just knew I had to learn everything I could about them. And what did I do? I went to her hometown for a few months and learned a bunch of stuff about skinwalkers. So I'll pass down to you, the reader, all information, scary stories, and lore I've learned from her family members and friends during my time in Ignacio, Colorado. Disclaimer: all information in this post was told to me by people on the reservation. These are not my own thoughts or opinions on skinwalkers, but things believed to be facts by some of the Native Americans in the area of Colorado and New Mexico I have had a chance of speaking with. So without further delay, let's learn about skinwalks. Skinwalkers are witches. So for starters, skinwalkers are definitely witches, not cryptids or whatever else you people are calling them. They are witches who possess the power of shape-shifting. Lots of people in the town told me skinwalkers can be from any tribe but are usually Navajo. Then again, the Navajo and Utes typically don't like each other from what I've seen. If you want to know why, research Skinwalker Ranch. This could be true, or it could just be shit talking between tribes. People in the town who have claimed to have seen skinwalkers would describe them to look differently. Since they shapeshift. Her uncles claimed to see one that looked like a big hairy thingy. Another guy said he saw one that looked like a huge white dog creature, and her cousin and her friends said they saw one that looked like a goat with big eyes standing on two legs wearing a jacket. Weird, right? There were even people in the town suspected of being skinwalkers or just indulging in bad medicine, which basically just means witchcraft. These people are known as bad medicine men. There are good medicine men as well, but these good medicine men are not skinwalkers. They can, however, combat spells put on a person by a bad medicine man. Don't whistle at night. One thing that attracts them that most of you probably knew about is whistling. People on the reservation would actually get upset if anyone were to whistle at night. My girlfriend actually told me this story of when she was younger with her friends during nighttime out in the boonies, which is basically just the middle of nowhere. She kept whistling just to be an asshole and piss her friends off. She only stopped when something in the distance whistled back the exact same way she had whistled. Now, this could have just been a weirdo whistling at a young girl for whatever reason, but that theory seems a lot less likely when you take into account she was at a friend's house and the closest neighbor was about a mile away. They don't care for outsiders. If you were hoping to see a skinwalker in person and aren't Native American, don't have any relationships with Native Americans, or live near a Native American reservation, you may be out of luck. It's believed around there that skinwalkers usually won't show themselves to someone just visiting the area, especially if that someone isn't native. However, if you spend a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time in the area, you might catch one. They can't directly harm you, but if you're afraid of them, they will mess with you. Usually, I see people online saying no Native American likes to talk about skinwalkers because that catches their attention. Well, everyone in Ignacio were really open to talking about them, especially her father, even though he himself said skinwalkers know when you talk about them. When I asked him why he still talks about these shape-shifting witch monsters without fear of them catching on, he told me he flat out wasn't afraid of them. In fact, he wanted smoke with a guy he thought was a skinwalker because a skinwalker scared his Hispanic girlfriend so bad she skipped town, illegally crossed back over the Mexican border, and stayed in Mexico for a while. He told me skinwalkers won't outright attack you or kill you, but they can still cause you harm. They might do this by jump scaring you and causing you to crash your car, killing your livestock, or casting spells. If a skinwalker or bad medicine man gets a strand of your hair or something else of yours, they can cast a spell on you, causing you to become sick or giving you very bad luck. They've even been known to separate couples, just like how they scared his GF back over the border. Eventually she came back and told everyone about her skinwalker encounter, but I'll tell that story another time. Now that's just some of the info I got while I was down there. I have even got scary stories and shit too. There are even things in the Colorado, New Mexico area a lot scarier and more unexplainable than skinwalkers. Second story. You know the legends about skinwalkers, right? This past October, I had worked at a haunt, that is, a haunted attraction at a local theme park. I was pretty good at managing the big crowds, but what I really enjoyed was when the crowds would get smaller, and groups of 10 to 20 people were coming into my attraction. During times when the crowds were thin like that, I loved scaring them with stories and legends I knew about, and one of my favorite legends to tell them were the Skinwalker legends. I would start off greeting the group and tempting them with the offer to tell them all a story, asking them if they would like to hear a local legend, as we live in the desert, and this haunt was tucked away in the heart of miles of desert land. When they would agree, I would start my tale. Some of you may know about skinwalkers, and for those of you that do, you might know that native Navajo and Hopi tribes are fearful to even speak of this creature, or to even utter its name. These monsters span from southern Arizona all through to New Mexico and the Mexican border, and across the lands of the native peoples. The Navajo believe them to be witches or shaman, an evil being with the supernatural power to shape-shift, typically by wearing the skins or masks of the animal they wish to walk as, a practice which is looked down upon by the Navajo people. This power is gained after killing a close relative or sibling and imbues the being with many dark powers. The animal they appear as, however, always looks wrong. A deer or coyote that stands on its hind legs and walks as a man does. A crow or owl, or has a face or eyes that look too human to belong to the animal they mimic, and that glow red in the moonlight. In all the legends, it says there is always one sure way to identify a skinwalker. A skinwalker, no matter what, will never be able to move as the creature it appears as in its animal form. Skinwalkers are able to do other things as well. They can move at seemingly impossible speeds and can mimic the voice of people, crying babies, your friends or loved ones, voices you would trust. They will lure you out into the forests or into the pitch black of the nighttime desert, and once they have you isolated and you lay your eyes upon their face, it is said you will die an agonizing death. Skinwalkers can curse people and cause them great suffering. Often, it is said they use a mixture that some call corpse powder when seen in their human form, which turns your tongue black and causes violent convulsions until you die. The worst part about skinwalkers? The reason native people dare not speak of it? It is believed that a skinwalker is capable of reading your minds, and the more aware of them you are, the more aware they become of you. So try not to think about it. But if on your ride home you see a coyote in your path, or hear the drums of native people echoing loudly through the darkness, take care to drive quickly and pray it will not pursue you. And I would almost always be met with looks of horror and fear. It was my absolute favorite tale to tell for this reason. I would tell this story over and over to as many groups as I could. It wasn't a good idea to talk about them. I would say as much with each recounting of the legend, and much less in the middle of the desert, surrounded by inky blackness that engulfed everything the park's lights didn't illuminate. But I did. I felt safe. Nothing would happen to me. It was just a legend. That was until I drove home after my shift, around 1 a.m, after a night of telling this particular story dozens of times to guests. As I drove through the twists and turns of the pitch-black mountainous desert road I traveled each night to go home, my high beams on, penetrating the darkness just enough for me to see the road and the first layer of brush on either side of it. My headlights shone on an animal, a coyote. At first, I thought it was just the angle the lights had hit it at that made it appear to have no tail. But as I continued driving, I encountered the animal again, 3 times, each within several miles of each sighting. A distance any normal animal wouldn't have been able to make, especially when running against a car going 65 miles per hour for most of the journey. Each time I would scan the road for wildlife, and I would see it. There, just outside of the darkness, the coyote with no tail, staring at me from the side of the road. My stomach churned a bit, and I breathed deep, trying to tell myself I was just imagining things. The coyotes had tails, and none of them were the same animal. It wasn't possible. I couldn't be. But I knew deep down I was lying to myself. I knew I was wrong. I knew it was real, and it was terrifying. I'm relieved to say I made it home safely that night. But still, every now and then, when I drive through the desert in the darkness of night, or glance out my bedroom window into the blackness, I can see that coyote, that skinwalker. I hope it never decides I know too much, but I think that maybe, just maybe, it visits me to remind me of its presence, that it wants me to continue telling this story, to continue spreading awareness of their presence, so that it can claim the lives of those who were weak-minded enough to fall prey to it. And now that you know the story, maybe it will come after you. Third story. I saw a skinwalker on Riverdale Road last night. For context, me and my boyfriend go to this winding road called Riverdale Road in Thornton, Colorado. There is numerous things haunting this road, like a phantom Camaro that can run you off the road, or a little girl in a white dress who walks along the side of the road and can appear in your back seat, or even a jogger who was killed asking for a ride. It's an 11-mile stretch going from Thornton all the way to Frederick. Anyways, we go pretty frequently, but never really saw anything until a couple weeks ago. It was about 2:30 a.m. We were getting onto Riverdale through McKay. As we entered, the air was warm, but there was a pungent smell of horse shit, since people actually do live on this road and have horses and land here. We have our windows down, and not even 2 minutes on the road, my boyfriend shouts, "Holy shit, what the fuck was that?" Clearly panicking. I asked frantically over and over, "What did you see?" He was silent for a couple seconds, then rolls up his sleeves to uncover the goosebumps on his arm. When I looked over at him, his mouth was wide open with his hand covering it. I saw a figure, looked like something in a white dress, running in the field. He said in a very serious tone. After that, we were both shaken up and decided to leave immediately after. The whole ride home consisted of "What the fuck was that?" or "Are you sure that's what you saw?" We went to bed still thinking about what we had seen. He's very good at covering up his emotions, and I almost felt like I was more afraid than him, even though I hadn't seen it. We both were afraid of this road, for good reasons. After this encounter, it wasn't enough to stop us from coming back. We had gone back a couple times after, but never saw anything. We just felt like we were being watched. Very eerie feeling, almost sinister. Fast forward to yesterday. It was about 1:30 a.m., the same warm air, but this time it smelled of something rotting. Putrid smell. We go back, and right off the bat, we see 2 dead raccoons not even 100 feet from each other down the road. I didn't have any good feelings about that, and I already knew it wasn't a good sign, but we decided to continue. We traveled on the road 2 times beginning to end without seeing anything, and as we both wanted to leave, we said, "Well, fuck it, 3rd time's a charm," and went one last time. Except this time, we asked politely that if there was anything out. To show itself, and holy shit, I was not prepared to what I was about to witness. I don't think my boyfriend was ready to what he was about to hear either. As we get towards the middle of this road, there is a small concrete barricade on a slight curve, and that's where I saw it. Its pale, scrawny body, bald head, and long arms sitting, almost hunched over the barricade, right when our car lights illuminate that thing. It swiftly hides behind the barricade, going back into the pitch black woods behind it. I shout to my boyfriend, "Babe, did you see that thing?" He replies, "No, what?" "What? What?" Petrified since he was already on edge. I drive faster, and then it hit me. "Babe, I think that was an SW. He looks at me, a look of someone who has just seen a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost, it was something far worse. We left immediately after that, and don't plan on going back anytime soon. I can confidently say that was the most terrifying encounter I have ever had in my entire 20 years of existence. Fourth story, my Skinwalker story, Arizona. Okay, so to start out, I live in Mesa, Arizona, which is basically Phoenix, Arizona, because the main cities of Arizona spread out into many sites with no border in between. Mesa is what I would call the suburbs of Phoenix. I changed my name, of course. I live in an apartment complex I would describe as close to the ghetto, but still nice. I live in a bedroom, one bathroom apartment with my girlfriend. Arizona is a state full of ancient Native American history. I live next to a Hohokam Canal, as do many Arizonians. The whole place used to be cities of ancient Native Americans. The point is, I'm in the area for what I believe to be a skinwalker. I'll get to my story. Yesterday, I was drinking. One of the things I picked up during the COVID-19 quarantine, or what's enforced here. And I decided to smoke a bowl on my apartment patio, which I don't usually do, mind you. I just finished loading up my pipe and taking the first hit when I hear a voice somewhere nearby. "Amanda, open the door, please." It was a young, probably in the 20s girl's voice talking, and it sounded calm and teasing. It continued on as I tried to ignore it, smoking my last bud. After about 4 times of it repeating itself, my curiosity caused me to look for the source. I saw in an apartment building facing across from me movement. I saw a dog standing on its hind legs leaning on a door, tapping. At first, I shrugged, of course. Then I hear the voice again. It sounded exactly the same as last time. Exactly the same, as if you recorded their voice in that sentence and replayed it once again. There wasn't any other sound or movement in the complex. I watched the thing knock on Amanda's door for like 30 seconds in what I would call a state of shock and curiosity. Then it stopped and didn't move for another 20 seconds, until the dog thing stood all the way up, away from the doorway, on its hind legs and turned to face me. It made eye contact with me, which is weird because we were at least 50 yards away. I'm on the 3rd floor, it's on the 2nd, but I felt it looking at me. I held its eye contact. I was so scared, I felt like I should run. Then it got on all 4s and headed down the stairs slowly. At the bottom, it started slowly walking over to me. I was on all 4s now, about to go inside or scream, I don't know. But I had to know what this thing was going to do. It walked close to my balcony. Yes, it was a dog, a brownish yellow, dirty-looking thing, with big eyes that were 100% attentive to mine. It didn't seem natural, to be honest, but nothing looked wrong at a glance, except that it was staring into my eyes and wouldn't stop. I ran inside as it reached the bottom of my stairs and locked my doors. Soon I heard clawing at my door, doggy clawing. Next I heard the door handle jiggle, then it started on my porch door. I of course never answered. Instead I hid behind my kitchen counter with a knife. After about 30 minutes it left. I stayed up all night, but I didn't see it again, and I didn't go out again. I'm hoping it doesn't come back. I haven't gone outside at night again. I'm burning sage and trying to be careful as I can. Fifth story. Skinwalker at the gas station. This story belongs to a friend of mine. He told me this once, and I simply have to tell it. My friend is of Wikinuxv heritage, a Native American tribe who settled the Pacific Northwest coast. He is quite the character. For one, he is a whopping 6'10" foot and has the blackest eyes you could imagine. He always has this frowning face going on, which makes him even more intimidating. He is everything but a bad guy. In fact, he is the most gentle of giants. He was working at a gas station up north back in 1992, and he pretty much always worked the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. when he was relieved. Business wasn't exactly booming at nights, so he was usually watching TV or reading magazines between customers. And they were few. The area he lived and worked in was deeply associated with all things Native American. There was a potent sense of pride in the surrounding communities, but also a very distinct presence of superstition and old traditions. My friend was no exception. He was a firm believer of the ways of the old. This made his encounter even more terrifying. One night, he was sitting as usual watching TV when a customer entered the gas station. The customer paid for his gas, a pack of smokes, and some soda and returned to his car. Nothing unusual. But as my friend looked out the window toward the customer's car, he spotted what looked like a huge dog sitting by the edge of the woods. Now, the window is located on the side of the building, some distance from the sliding door, overlooking the pumps and the roof covering it. On the sides of the roof are pretty strong halogen lights which shine into the gas station. This gives the gas station not only an eerie lighting with the blinds casting long, striped shadows, but also blinds the teller to an extent. As he peered through the window, trying to focus on the dog, it was gone. He didn't think much of it. Even if it was a wolf, he was inside, and wolves don't tend to rob gas stations at night. Wolves were common here, but this wolf was huge. He brushed it off and returned to his mindless watching of the TV. A couple of hours go by and not a single customer has entered since the last one. He was just about to refill some condiments when he heard a large thud coming from the back. It wasn't inside, he could hear that, but it came from the back, and behind the building they keep the garbage. The gas station had been visited before by scavenging homeless, but my friend didn't really care. It wasn't his garbage, and it was just garbage. Let them take it. But it kept getting noisier. He decided to grab a flashlight and a gun from the office and circle around the back to tell whoever ventured there to leave, as he had had enough. His presence alone would have scared off anyone, but he wanted to feel safe just in case. He exited through the sliding doors, walking past the window he was just sitting by. As he turned the corner, he shines the light toward the dumpsters. As the cone of light hits the dumpsters, my friend instantly drops the flashlight and the gun. It's the huge dog he saw before, scouring through the garbage. It wasn't a dog, though. It clearly stood on its hind legs, reaching the same height as himself. It couldn't be a bear as it was too gaunt. The creature's eyes had been glowing in the light of the flashlight, making it even more terrifying. He ran inside the gas station, and he wasn't followed. He locked the door, stayed inside the whole night, and quit the next day. My friend is still convinced that he saw a skinwalker, a shape-shifting shaman of sorts that are a common occurrence in Native American lore and culture. So sorry for the absence of blood, guts, and glory. It's just a really creepy story. Sixth story. I think my neighbor's cat warded off a skinwalker. My father died about 5 years ago unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother, and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog Ace on a move further south to a small town situated about a half hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before we were slated to move, however, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night the street lights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at that exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me in my dead father's voice. "I'm sending something to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I was terrified of it. I didn't know why. And yet, I managed to squeak out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whispered. The orb remained silent for a few moments, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Damn. Black." I woke up almost instantaneously, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down south to Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us. With only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods, it was a nice fit for us. Probably the best reliever of all the stress that came with the move, however, was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She helped ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new house, I awoke suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One important thing to know about our dog Ace is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check Mom's bedroom, however, as to avoid waking her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyway, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woodlands and realized I had forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. Shit, I thought to myself. He got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. "Ace, Ace." I shouted into the neighboring trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. That time, it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear, a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life than that night, as I stared down the same gravel road that had led us to our new home. But in that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters, so I pressed onward. "Ace, come on, boy. Home's this way, buddy." That's when I heard it, the cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound. There, stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed persona. She was no longer the happy, affectionate kid I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and uttered the lowest growl I had ever heard come out of a feline. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more, but there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face, one of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the gruesome sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I unmistakably heard this beast mutter two solemn words, in a low, gravelly voice. "Damn. Black." In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down. Almost as if nothing had happened, she rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before bolting upstairs. I made sure that little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I've done, I think I was almost the victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing I'd likely come to his aid. For whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night. Maybe because that same cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night. Or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And the most ironic part of it all? That cat's name is Halloween. 7th story. My boyfriend brought a skinwalker to my house. "Natalie, I swear to God, if you say that word, I'll kick you out of my car and leave you on the side of the road," Haley threatened. You know, Lucia is what I was trying to say to my friend Haley. In case you don't know what that is, that's the Navajo name for a skinwalker. I just found this out not too long ago, too. Skinwalkers are an interesting Navajo legend. Basically, they're like shapeshifters. I know a lot of people who live out in the secluded countryside that have claimed to see them. I, personally, never saw one before. Not until my idiot boyfriend brought one to my house. Now, before my boyfriend told me about his skinwalker stalker, I had always teased Haley about them. We would drive through secluded areas at night, just for the thrill of what lies in the darkness, but she wasn't a fan when I brought them up in her car. I'd make comments about them just to freak her out. "Haley, what if we saw a deer standing on its hind legs in the field next to us? What if you saw yourself sprinting behind the car in the rearview mirror right now?" Despite my teasing, I really did believe in skinwalkers. I've always believed in legends and supernatural beings like that, and it was interesting to learn about. Not that I really did that much deep diving into the subject, but what I did learn freaked me out. You would think that would keep me from making jokes about it in prime skinwalker territory, but not all of us have that much common sense. I'm not the only one, though. Like I had mentioned before, I don't believe my jokes are what brought one to my house. You see, my boyfriend lives out in the countryside with lots of open space around him. He's always mentioned how he felt like something was stalking him out there, watching as he moved from his car to the house. He always kind of assumed it was some type of freaky animal. His suspicions were confirmed, but it wasn't exactly what he thought it was. According to him, he saw a skinwalker in the field when he came home from my place one night. "Gavin, come on. You didn't see a skinwalker." "Nat, I'm telling you, most animals aren't that tall, and their eyes don't glow green. How much sleep did you get?" He gave me a disapproving look. His claim was that the night before, when he got home, he saw a tall, looming creature watching him from the tree line with bright green and glowing eyes. Now, like I said, I do believe in skinwalkers, but my boyfriend also doesn't get much sleep, so of course I figured he was hallucinating something watching him. I wasn't hallucinating. There was a skinwalker at my place, and I saw him, and I literally almost pissed my pants. I promise, I wasn't imagining anything. I caved in and told him I believe him, and as long as he didn't conjure one up at my place, that's all that mattered to me. Then we went to bed and never saw any skinwalkers again. That should have been the happy ending of this story, right? Nope. I really didn't think about it the next day. I mean, I live in a pretty busy area. It's not exactly where you would think most skinwalkers reside, but maybe some have a preference for bigger cities. More people to stalk, I guess. Throughout the day, I had been cleaning the house, getting it ready for the week ahead. Since I work close to 40 hours a week, I really don't have much time to clean, so I basically just do it when I can. Time flew by, and at 8:40 p.m., all I had to do was take out the trash. It's around the time of year where night falls pretty early, so I had to take the trash out in the dark. Normally that wouldn't really bother me, but because of my boyfriend's little tale that I happened to remember at that moment, it freaked me out. Just a little bit, not enough to piss my pants like some other people. When I stepped outside and heard a low growl, maybe that was closer to pissing my pants territory. My neighbors do have a little pit bull that they leave chained up outside, ridiculous, so I just blamed the noise on him. That's the most reasonable explanation, and to keep myself from freaking out, I had to stay reasonable. Then I saw the eyes. Not pit bull eyes. Not any dog's eyes. Nothing even remotely close to a normal animal or even human. And they weren't even green, so at least my boyfriend's skinwalker stayed behind. All I could see in the darkness of my neighbor's yard was two glowing red eyes. Maybe this was a good time to piss my pants, and God only knows I was close. I've always heard the term fight or flight, and I figured I would be a flight type of girl. I was right. I threw the bags on the ground and basically flung my body back to the front door, frantically trying to turn the knob to get it to open. I heard twigs break under someone's steps, and that's when I pissed my pants. I guess I am more of a baby than my boyfriend after all. The door slammed loudly behind me, but nothing could mask the growling noise I heard from the other side of the glass. Because it was so dark, I really couldn't make out more than a silhouette, but the silhouette was enough to make me go from pissing myself to shitting myself. The outline looked sort of fuzzy, like it had some type of hair on its body. The worst part were its eyes. Somehow they were even brighter than they were before, a piercing and sinister red. I had already locked the knob. Thank God I formed that habit, but I needed to find my keys to fully lock the door. I didn't want to take my eyes off of whatever was on the other side of that glass, but I knew I had to. It had to be tonight that my keys weren't hanging on the hook where I usually kept them. I'll remember this the next time I toss them on my desk. When I turned back around from grabbing my keys, those glowing red eyes were no longer staring at me. Somehow that made this entire situation way worse. I needed to see where he was stalking me from. I couldn't really focus on that at the moment, so I hurried towards the door, locked it with my key, and closed the inside door. The windows were all closed and locked, so I knew that he couldn't get inside without me hearing some resistance. It took about 3 hours for me to finally calm down, but until then I kept my eyes open. I barely blinked until the stress from the situation turned into fatigue, and I could barely keep my eyes open. I didn't feel the same presence as I did while I was outside, so maybe that was a good sign, but I really didn't want to fall asleep. I felt vulnerable enough sitting in my bed, a hammer and mace next to me, of course. But I did. I fell asleep, in my piss-soaked pants, might I add, and woke up the next morning, alive. I didn't feel alive. I felt like 10 years had been taken off my life. But I was breathing and I wasn't hurt, not physically at least. Oh, shit. Gavin. I need to tell Gavin. 10:34 a.m. He was probably asleep, but at that point I really didn't care, so I FaceTimed him. I saw myself in the front view camera. My eyes were bloodshot and puffy, probably from keeping them open for so long. I guess this kind of freaked Gavin out. Nat? What the hell? Did you dash? I know it's rude to interrupt, but I had to cut him off. I'm sure he probably didn't understand most of what I said, considering I was basically racing through the story, but his face at the end of my story told me that he understood enough. And he actually believed me, probably because I looked like I had the life sucked out of me. I haven't felt the presence of that thing since that night, and it's been 2 nights since I saw those red eyes outside my door, but I have a feeling it isn't going to leave me alone forever. I just hope that next time I'll be prepared, even though it's pretty hard to prepare for a Skinwalker attack. But if I do get attacked, blame my idiot boyfriend, since he basically summoned it to my front door. Maybe I'll get him to kill it for me. 8th story. My Skinwalker experience. My day started off pretty normal. At 6:30 my alarm woke me up, and I proceeded with my normal routine, such as I showered, brushed my teeth, and threw my hiking gear on. I'm a pretty avid hiker, wouldn't say very experienced, but I know what I'm doing, so I go every weekend when I can. Around 7:30, that was when I was ready to drive to my chosen hiking route, Basalt Mountain, Colorado. This was about a 3-hour drive from where I live, so I was pretty exhausted by the time I got there after being up so early. The hike started off great. The sun was beaming down on me, and I could hear all the birds singing and all the critters running around in the forests. Along my route that I chose, there was gorgeous views and amazing scenery, so I stopped whenever I could to take in the views and just live in the moment. A few times I stopped to make myself a coffee and to take some stunning photos for my friends back home in the UK. However, by the time I got to the top, I realized it was getting dark. This is when I noticed I was walking back in the dark. This is where it started to get creepy. On my way back down, I had a sharp feeling on the back of my head, like someone was watching me. I chose to ignore it and carried on walking. The thing is, though, the more I walked and the darker it got, the feeling kept getting more intense. In an act to distract myself, I whistled the tune to my favorite song. This is when I could hear someone walk behind me in the distance, but not too far to not hear them. Too far to see them, though. I kept glancing behind me and kept seeing nothing. Looked to my left and right and still nothing. As I kept on walking, I could still hear it following me, and that sharp feeling of being watched was getting unbearable. About 40 minutes has passed since setting off back down, and I didn't notice whatever was following has been slowly getting closer. I realized this when I looked behind me, about the 100th time, and this time I saw a deer. This wasn't a normal deer either. This deer looked like if it was dead, but somehow still alive. It had red glowing eyes locked right onto me, its skin all patchy and some of it hanging off too. Bones were sticking out off its limbs and chest, blood also dripping from its mouth. It just wasn't natural. By the time it sunk into what I was looking at, it started walking to me at a fast pace. That ain't normal either, I thought. Then it hit me. I'm gonna die if I don't run. I flung my body around and started sprinting for my life, with every ounce of energy I had. That's when I heard it. That shrill scream from behind. Sounded half human, half coyote. The human half sounded like a death scream. It sent chills down my spine and my shit into my pants. Footsteps were getting faster and closer behind me, but I kept on pushing. My legs were burning and my lungs screaming. I wanted to quit. That's when it was close enough I could hear it grunting. I was shitting myself. After running for what felt like an eternity later, I built up the courage to look over my shoulder. This was a mistake. What I saw was no longer a deer. What I was looking at was roughly 7 foot tall. It had abnormally long limbs, and it was insanely skinny with barely any muscle on its frame. What skin it had was gray and hanging from its limbs and torso, just like the deer. Some of it was human skin, some of it was animal skin. From what I could make out, the animal skin could have been from a deer or even a coyote. What creeped me out the most was its face. Well, lack of. 2 hollow and black pits replaced the eyes, and it had a gaping mouth with bloody razor-sharp teeth. Panic truly set in. Then I heard the scream again. At the same time, it swiftly swung its dangly arm at me, which had pointy, sharp, long fingers attached at the end of it. Ducking out the way of its arm, it managed to tear a chunk of flesh from my right shoulder. Blinding with pain, I tripped and fell down an embankment. Rolling down it, I missed a few trees, but smashed into one of them. Winded, I feebly tried getting up, but to no avail. This was useless. My ankle was severely sprained, and I had no strength to get myself up off the ground. In a desperate attempt, I dragged myself into a bush so it couldn't see me. It was pitch black at this point. Rummaging around in my backpack like a madman, I clung onto my knife. Laying there in agonizing pain and wheezing, I could hear it grunting, walking around looking for me. I was shaking uncontrollably. I thought I was gonna die. After laying in the bush for what felt like hours, listening to it patrol the area around me and grunting, I had a moment of stupidity. Looking out of the bush, I no longer saw the 7-foot figure. I saw the silhouette of a deer feet away from me. With every ounce of courage and energy I had, I leapt out of the bush, throwing my body and my knife at the deer. Driving my knife into its skull, I could hear the crunching of the bone and the squelching of flesh, and a viscous liquid cover my hand. At the same time, an inhuman scream, similar to the screams before that came from the deer. The deer fell limp, and so did my body next to it. Hoping I killed it, and it's not gonna kill me, I passed out from exhaustion. Waking up hours later with the sun beaming down on my face with its warm rays, I realized I was still alive. However, the deer must be as well. Getting up and looking around, there was no sight of the deer nor my knife, just a blood trail going back to where I was running from. Then I heard the same scream again from the same direction. Panic rushing my body again, I sprinted down the trail, still hearing the same scream over and over, getting closer. and getting back to my car, throwing myself into it and sped to the closest hospital. That's the day I truly believed skinwalkers are real, and I managed to survive. Somehow. Ninth story. Never shoot a skinwalker. My two buddies and I went on a hunting trip for bull elk last November, and we were having a great time, to say the least. That, however, soon would change after what we saw on the third day. Now, I'm not one for superstition, and I don't believe in ghosts at all, but what we saw out there really changed my view about those sorts of things. The trip started out normally after we parked our trailers at camp. We got there a day early before the hunt officially started so we could settle in and get some scouting done. Only Eric and I had licenses because Brian didn't draw out this year, but he wanted to come along with us anyway. Brian also brought along his German Shepherd named Lucy, which stayed back at camp with a leash that was connected to a metal spike. The spike was so deep in the ground that I wondered if we would be able to get it out. I asked Brian, and he just told me that his dog was so strong that it had to be that deep. I enjoyed playing with Lucy. She was always excited to see me and would greet me by jumping up on two legs and trying to lick my face. Eric, however, was not amused by her and would constantly yell at her to leave him alone. Anyway, the first 2 days we saw so many cow elk in valleys and on sides of the mountains that I thought for sure we would see some bulls out there, but there were none among them. It wasn't until the third day of the hunt that we saw a bull elk, but it was too far away to take a shot at. And even if we were able to hit it, it would take hours trying to pack that thing out. So that evening we decided to hunker down next to some fallen trees and were able to watch a hillside. While we were surveying the area, Brian spotted a coyote about 250 yards walking to a small pond of water strangely as if it was maimed. Eric took out his binoculars to take a closer look, and he started to describe it, saying, "That coyote. It ain't right looking. It has a hunch on its back like a bear, and its jaw. Oh man, its damn jaw seems like it's been broken, and now it's just drooping there like a dead fish. Let me see those binos," I asked curiously with an outstretched hand. Eric handed them to me, and as he did, he seemed to grasp his gun tightly. I took them and looked at the animal and said, "You're right. That thing's jaw is just hanging there. Also, did you happen to notice its hair? It's so long and unevenly dispersed." I then handed the binoculars to Brian, and he looked at the coyote for 1 second and screamed. Brian, shut up. We're hunting." Eric whispered harshly. "What did you see?" I asked as I looked at his shocked facial expression. Brian looked at his feet as he muttered, I saw my dog Lucy, but it wasn't her. I don't know what that was. It couldn't have been your dog. When I looked at it, it looked like a dying coyote. It didn't have the large black spot on its back or your dog's strawberry red sides and underbelly. I said in a plain yet confused manner. "Well, since we ain't gonna see anything out here cause you screamed like a baby, I'm going to put that coyote out of its misery," Eric said angrily as he raised his rifle and looked through the scope. A large shot followed, and we saw the animal drop down soon after. It was a clean kill, and Eric was curious about seeing what was wrong with the animal up close, so he started getting ready to hike out. As he got his stuff together, he said, "You probably just didn't get a good look at it, Brian. Your dog is fine." Brian stood up, and as he brushed the dirt off but he replied, "I swear I saw my dog, but an evil, demented version of it with human eyes. But you guys are probably right. There's no way she could have had the strength to yank out the metal stake holding her back at camp." "Well, let's go find out the truth about this animal," I said somewhat excitedly as I started walking toward the dead animal. It took us about half an hour to hike over to it, and we lost sight of the animal's corpse as we had to pass through some trees. Once we finally got to the spot where the animal had dropped, there was no corpse, just a puddle of blood. However, The blood was blackish and very dense. Eric observed the scene and started to scratch his head as he said, "I could have sworn I shot that thing straight through its heart. There's no way it could have just gotten back up and walked off." I had an eerie feeling about the whole situation, and Brian was still afraid that it might have been his dog that got shot. Eric, however, noticed a trail of blood leading into a dark tree line. Without asking, he started to follow it, and he loaded his gun. As he did, me and Brian were both freaked out and just watched Eric as he went into the forest. He soon went out of sight, and Brian and I could not leave him here, so we waited. I passed the time by taking a skinny stick and poking at the puddle of blood. It smelled terrible, and the aroma hit me pretty hard, so much so that my stomach convulsed and I threw up. "You okay?" Brian asked as he put his hand on my back. Before I could answer, there was a loud shot that echoed through the trees, and we both looked at the direction it came from. "Must have found the animal," I said as I spit into the grass. As soon as I said this, we could now see Eric, but he was full on sprinting. "Run!" he screamed as he ran at us. I noticed that he must have dropped his gun because he wasn't carrying it. I was about to ask him what happened, but Brian grabbed my arm and yanked me towards where we had parked the truck. Without hesitation, I ran. We soon made it back to the truck, and my shoulder hurt from the rubbing of the gun strap. I looked back at Eric, who slowed down for nothing. I soon looked behind him and saw nothing chasing us. So I opened the truck and got in without worry. Eric then climbed in and told me to hit the gas and go. I was so perplexed on what Eric saw out there, and I knew that he hardly ever got scared of anything, so this started to freak me out. I started driving fast back to camp, and I asked Eric, "What did you see out there that was scary enough to make you drop your gun?" "I don't know, man. There was no damn animal." I followed the trail of blood, and it stopped at the base of a tree, and I was wondering how a coyote was able to climb a tree, but when I looked up I saw this hairy humanoid creature there. It smelled so freaking bad. Eric went on about how scary that thing was and how he was done with the hunting trip and wanted to go home. We soon pulled into camp and mutually decided that we were going home. I started to pack my things and then felt like something was missing. I then thought to myself, "Lucy, where is Brian's dog? She usually always is so excited to see us back at camp, she can't stop barking and whining to be set free." As soon as I thought this, Brian started screaming and crying. I ran over to where he was and saw that his dog was gone. However, on further inspection, I noticed what Brian was looking at. Something had pulled out the metal stake in the ground and strung Lucy up on a nearby tree and had skinned her. Brian just could not stop crying, and Eric ran over to see what was wrong and just stood there, jaw dropped and frozen. He then muttered, "She was skinned alive. There's a bunch of bruising caused by struggling around her neck where the collar is." "Shut up, Eric. You ain't helping," I said as I put my shoulder around Brian, who had unstrung his dog's body from the tree. "Skinwalker," Eric said in a low tone of voice as he looked into the distance. He then screamed, "It's a damn skinwalker." I followed his gaze and saw an animal that looked like Lucy, but it had human eyes and a sickly green glazed looking coat of fur. Brian stopped crying and just stood there, eyes locked on the beast. Eric then whispered with his voice quivering, "We all run to the truck on a count of 3. Just leave everything else." Brian and I slowly nodded and agreed to the plan. "Okay, 3, 2, 1. Eric whispered sharply, and we all took off like a pack of gazelles for the truck. We hopped in, and as soon as we did, we saw the Skinwalker lunge at us and struck the right side door with such a powerful blow that nearly tipped over the whole truck. It didn't stop me whatsoever, and I drove out of there faster than I ever could have. After that, none of us ever went hunting again in that area. We never even went back to claim our camping trailers and supplies. It was too terrifying to think that what happened to Brian's dog could happen to us, and that thing would walk around in our skin. Since that experience, I am now a superstitious person. 10th story. The Skinwalkers of Wisconsin. It was a weekend. I was out hunting in the northern forests of Wisconsin. I was walking through the woods. It was near dark when I came across a clearing. It couldn't have been more than 50 feet in diameter. Then I saw it, the largest buck I had ever seen. I then laid down on my stomach and pointed my rifle at its heart. The buck must have heard me as it looked in my direction, but it didn't see me, so it went back to grazing in the field. As I pulled the trigger of my rifle, a large branch snapped behind, and I thought I saw a wolf running off beside me, causing me to flinch and miss my shot, hitting the buck in the side of the torso as the buck let out a scream. I know I had hit something important as its side was gushing blood. It still ran. But I knew it would die at some point soon from its wound. I just had to follow the blood as it ran. I followed the blood trail for a few minutes before coming across a much larger clearing, at least 300 feet in diameter, and I saw movement at the other end of the clearing. Thinking it was the buck, I got back onto my stomach and chest and aimed my scope at the movement to see what it was, seeing a wolf eating the buck. I was disappointed the wolf had killed the buck before I could, but I just watched it, in awe by the cruelty yet beauty of nature. But then I saw something. Was that a hand where the wolf's paw should be? No, it couldn't be. It must just be a scratch from the wolf. But did it have human teeth? I shifted a bit in my spot to try and see better, snapping a twig. There's no way the wolf could have heard me, but its head then snapped up to me on the small raised plateau I was on. It looked like it had human eyes, and it looked like it smiled at me. And it then stood up on its hind legs, still looking at me, deer's throat gripped in its long-fingered hand. This scared me so much I dropped my rifle, and in the second it took me to look down and grab my rifle again, the wolf was already halfway across the clearing. There was no way it could have gotten there that fast. As I looked back up at it, it stopped running, still looking at me. What the fuck? I whispered under my breath, terrified. I stayed where I was and stood up with my rifle aimed at it, still looking at the wolf. There was no way it could be a wolf, but the one thing I've learned from my 16 years of hunting and camping: never turn your back on and run from a predator that was hunting you. The wolf then opened its mouth like it was yawning, but it then let out a scream that sounded part human scream, part howl, and part animalistic screech as it then looked like the wolf frowned at me like it was disappointed in me standing my ground. Before walking back to the deer and crouching down before continuing to eat it, as I then turned and ran for at least an hour back to my car, that horrifying scream playing in my head on repeat before I practically dived into my car. It was the happiest I'd ever been to see that old piece of shit in my entire life. As I then drove home, I didn't turn the radio on. I just drove in silence. When I got home, I just cried in my car from fear of what had happened and joy from finally being safe for at least 5 minutes before finally getting out of the car and running into my house, locking every door and window and pulling every curtain shut. If you ever go hunting in the woods of northern Wisconsin, do not stay if you come across a wolf eating. Those things don't like it when you stare. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.